All right, so good afternoon. Today I'm going to be comparing the law enforcement in Japan with the law enforcement from the United States. So I chose Japan because its policing system is known internationally for extremely low crime rates, the strong community engagement, and their remarkably high levels of public trust. These results, they're not coincidences. They come from deep cultural traditions and a policing model that looks very different from what we're familiar with in America. When we compare these two systems by side, we find differences in structure, their daily practices, their training, and their philosophy. But these differences do more than just show two different methods of policing. They tell us something meaningful about each other's country's history, culture, and values. In other words, if you want to understand a nation's justice system, you have to understand the society behind it. And then So, with Japan, their policing operates under a highly centralized system. At the top of their system is the National Police Agency, NPA, which is they set policies, training standards, procedures, and ethical expectations for the entire country. So, underneath that is the 47 pre-textual police departments, and these agencies they carry out the everyday policing duties, but they do so under the same national rules as the NPA. So that level of uniformity simply, I mean, it doesn't exist in the U.S., the United States. One of the most recognizable features of Japanese policing is the Koban system. The Koban are small neighborhood police stations that are usually no bigger than a small office or storefront, and they're staffed by officers who are deeply familiar with the area they patrol. The officers are assigned to a Koban. They know families, the business owners, the elderly residents, and even the students who walk the same route every morning. These officers, they don't wait for crime to happen, they actively work to prevent it. They usually walk or bike through neighborhoods. They check in with residents, conduct home visits. They call them residential surveys, and they mediate small disputes before they escalate. Their presence is steady and consistent, which builds trust over time. The Japanese culture also allows or plays a huge role in how officers perform their duties. Police officers are expected to act as moral guides, which is the people who set an example through discipline, self control, and humility. Their training reflects this cultural expectation. New recruits typically receive 1 to 2 years of intensive training, and that's typically far longer than what the American recruits receive. So after acad- their academy training, they complete a long period of supervised on hand or on the job training. Because Japan has values, harmony, and cooperation, the officers often use communication, persuasion, and relationship building rather than aggressive tactics. Their goal isn't just to enforce laws, it is to maintain social order and promote community well being. So, the American policing system is almost the opposite in structure. Instead of one national police agency, we have more than 18,000 separate law enforcement agencies. These agencies include local police departments, county sheriffs, state police, tribal police, and dozens of federal agencies. Because of this, training standards, policies, and oversight mechanisms are they vary drastically from one jurisdiction or company to another. In the United States, policing tends to be more reactive than preventive. Officers usually respond to 911 calls, they investigate crimes after they occur, conduct traffic stops, and they patrol large areas in vehicles. These tasks are essential, but they create less opportunity for long term community engagement. Another defining feature of U.S. policing is their emphasis on our individual rights. So our Constitution, with the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, they shape everything from how police conduct searches to how they interrogate suspects. These rights are essential to American identity, but they also can create a more legalistic and sometimes adversarial relationship with the police and the public. So the public trust in police usually varies widely from or across the U.S. So in some rural areas, officers are well known and highly trusted. In many urban or historically marginalized communities, trust may be worse or lower due to their past experiences, the inconsistency of the enforcement, or the high profile incidents involving excessive force. Training in the U.S. also varies greatly. Some academies last from 6 months, and then others last a few weeks. Oversight can be strong in the state and almost non existent in another. This inconsistency creates challenges that Japan simply they just don't usually face. So some similarities and differences is that Japan and the US share some fundamental similarities. So both of them have structured training academies, both invested at crime, and they are committed to maintaining public safety. However, the differences are far more revealing. So, Japan's policing reflects a society that values social harmony, prevention, and group responsibility. So, the officers often may aim to guide, support, and mediate rather than rely on their force. Their community trust is consistently high. However, the U.S. approach reflects a society built on individual rights, personal freedom, and local authority. So, while this protects liberties, it also creates tension and inconsistency. So, the crime rates are generally higher, and the public trust it varies a lot throughout the nation. So, these differences they didn't happen overnight. They came from years and years of cultural development. So Japan's policing is influenced by the Confucian traditions that emphasize respect for authority, avoiding shame, and the moral behavior. So after World War II, Japan reformed its entire system, moving away from materialistic policing and toward a community-centered model. The United States, in contrast, inherited the English common law system, which was shaped around the American ideals of independence and distrust, or of centralized power. Our founders wanted policing to stay local, and they didn't want it to be controlled by national authority. And that decision still affects us today. In every state and city, they determine their own approach. So in Japan, the Koban system is a perfect example of cultural values that are expressed through policy. It shows the presence, it shows the presence, visibility, and personal connection. The officers are supposed to be approachable and they're supposed to be community helpers. But in the U.S., decentralized policing reflects our belief that communities should govern themselves and that power should not be concentrated in one federal system. So this shows local values, but it also meant that two departments that are typically only 20 miles apart may operate completely differently. So neither model is flawless. Both of them have their own flaws, but each one can highlight what its society prioritizes. So some of the advantages and challenges that Japan has is that it enjoys low crime rates, strong compliance with laws, and they have exceptionally high trust between residents and police. But the system's focus on harmony can sometimes reduce transparency, and cultural pressure may encourage victims, especially the victims of domestic or sexual crimes, that could keep them from coming forward. And the U.S. system excels at protecting civil liberties, and local control allows communities to shape policing to their needs. But inconsistency in training and oversight could lead to unequal experiences, and it could strain the police community relationships, and that could genuinely remain a more of a major problem or challenge. So, some lessons that both countries could learn from each other is that there's no perfect policing system, but each country can learn valuable lessons from the other. The U.S. could benefit from Japan's preventative approach. It could build long term relationships and invest more heavily in training, discipline, and community involvement. And this could possibly improve trust and reduce crime over time. And with Japan, what they could learn from the United States is transparency, public accountability, and their robust protections for suspects' rights, which would in return strengthen their areas and could help address underreported crimes and improve fairness. So, in conclusion, in comparing Japan and the United States, what becomes clear to me is that policing is not just about enforcing laws, it's a reflection of culture. And Japan emphasizes harmony, prevention, and moral responsibility. The U.S. emphasizes its rights, its local control, and its constitutional protections. When I look and study at both of these systems, I gain a clear understanding of how policing can evolve. There isn't just one correct way to maintain public safety, but I think there's multiple opportunities to improve, and that's the end. And thank you.